This lecture is called The Biblical Tribes of Israel, the Lost Tribes of Israel, and the Purpose of Reality. We're going to try to go through a few key points that everyone's aware of and just weave them together into a unique narrative and see if it makes sense at the end. Before I'd like to begin, I'd like to go over an ancient legend that's been passed down from generation to generation so we can understand the seriousness of what we're about to discuss. There's such a thing in this world called spirituality and such a thing called physicality. And the sages of Israel said, in the future times, those two things merge, they become one. And I'd like to start off this lecture with the greatest example, I think, of that merging and how it ties into the story of the lost tribes of Israel. If we break down reality under a microscope, what is everything made of? What's the building blocks? What's the Lego pieces of this world? And the scientists say it's an atom. The nature of the atom, it has a nucleus in the center and electrons flying around it at high speeds. But the scientists say the distance between the electrons and the nucleus is this tremendous amount of open space. Compared to one penny on one end of a football field, all the way to the other end of that football field is open space. So I have a question, and everyone should have this question. If what we're made up of is made up of mostly nothing, how are we something? Right? And there's an answer, very easy answer, and I'll give an example. Take a helicopter. I look at a helicopter from an overhead view. It's got 4 blades. In between each blade is mostly empty space. But when the helicopter turns on, it becomes a solid. You can't even stick your finger through it. So the scientists say that the electrons are moving at such high speeds, it's creating a solid. It's creating a solid entity. And if that movement of the electrons stopped, this whole world would poof into nothing if they stopped moving. So scientists say, what's causing these electrons to move? Why are they moving at such high speeds? What's the catalyst behind it? And they said they're vibrating, they're pulsating. And if anyone listening is a musician, they understand sound and vibration go hand in hand. The scientists say there's a frequency that's generating this vibration. You ever pluck a string on a guitar, the vibration is creating the sound. And the scientists say there's a continuous frequency that's upkeeping this world, keeping the electrons in movement, and if that frequency stops, the world disappears. And they were fascinated, because when they looked at the teachings of ancient Israel and what the Israelites pray every day, we say, God spoke and this world came into being, right? What's speech? Is a sound vibration. Your vocal cords vibrate and creating words, sounds. So the scientists say, what kind of nation 3,000 something years ago it nailed the quantum nature of reality to the finest minute detail, that there's a continuous sound that's emanating from a source and it has to be maintained. If that sound stops, everything disappears. And they said not only that, within the Hebrew language there's a hint to this. The word daber in Hebrew, which is speak, has the same 3 letters as davar, which is thing. Teach you speech created thing. Blew my mind. That's fascinating. I'd like to give one more example, I think, of this kind of merging. It's a little tangent, but it's worthwhile. There was a scientist in Japan, Dr. Emoto. I'm sure everyone's heard of him. He did these tests with water and frequencies where he would speak to water. They would address water with vocal sounds, and the crystals, the structure of the water would change based on whether his words carried good energy or bad energy. And the water molecules reflected that. And so I was thinking to myself, that's a crazy study. What are we going to take away from this? So we say the Jewish people, when they drink water, they eat something, they make a blessing on it before they eat it. So I hear some of my friends, they say, yeah, you know what, these rabbis a couple thousand years ago were on a power trip, and they made this code where you have to say blessings on things so you could stay in their cult. So I'm thinking about it, I said, no, actually, whoever thought of that blessing idea, wherever it came from, is actually it's the deepest thing. Because for thousands of years, humans are drinking water, but there's a specific group of humans who are putting good words on their water before they drink it. So there's something there. So this is what I've just spoken about is the concept of the physicality and the spirituality merging into one, just one teaching. You could teach it from both sides, and it's the same thing. Teach someone to make a blessing, and teach someone that good words affects the water. They're going to come to the same conclusion. Now I'd like to go back to the story. So we all say we're all vibrating, right? You ever hang out with someone and you're like, nah, I didn't like his vibe, or we didn't vibe. So what's that about? So we're all vibrating, and subconsciously you could feel everyone's vibration around you. And if someone's on a totally different plateau than you, a different level, you may not get along. So we say the Moshe Rabbeinu, the Moses, the leader of Israel, he was able to come to anyone's vibration. He'll meet you there, and he'll raise your vibration. He'll bring you up. So they say the deeper someone is, the more connected to himself, the higher pitch vibration he is, the higher frequency he's vibrating on. So we believe Adam, the first man, was vibrating at 100%, using 100% of his brain. He was totally there. And we say at the time of his sinning, however we can understand that, we say the Hasidic masters teach that the sparks went around the whole world, the sparks of his energy, the sparks of his holiness. But scientifically, literally, they say that his vibrations were scattered around the world. And the name of the game of reality is to recollect them. So we'll get into that. How's that happen, right? How do we recollect those sparks? First, let's go quickly into the nature of reality. Why was the world created? What I'm about to say, almost everyone knows, but the way we're going to weave it together may be unique. Only one thing we could really say about the creator of the universe for sure, right? What's the one thing we could say? God is all good, all-encompassing goodness. So what's the nature of goodness? Is to give of itself, is to give goodness. That's what defines being good, is it could be shared. So God created a vessel that he could share its goodness with. This was the soul. But the vessel had a complaint. What was the complaint of the vessel? It was poor man's bread. It was a free handout. It didn't feel like it earned it. It wanted to earn this goodness. So God created a tree and says, don't eat from it. And you'll earn your goodness. You'll have done something to earn everything that is about to be bestowed upon you. And it was a great scenario. All of a sudden, Adam eats from the tree. Let's say I hire someone to paint my house. He doesn't paint my house. Am I going to pay him? No. He doesn't get paid because he didn't do the job. So according to the laws of creation, the world was supposed to be over. It was a done deal. Because Adam didn't fulfill his part. But the Creator said, there's one thing I could do to keep this world alive, invoking my attribute of mercy, and I could remove myself from the world and allow it to continue on. And this force that I created, this accusing force, he'll be preoccupied with this world, and he'll allow it to continue. And if you look at the story of the Torah, it's all about the seed of Adam trying to make it to the redemption. Adam, we know, is an acronym for Aleph, Daled, Mem, which stands for Adam, David, Mashiach, which means that the potential for the Messiah, for the Redeemer, existed in Adam at the time of his sinning, and it had to make it the seed of the Messiah from Adam to the Messiah without getting caught by this accusing force, whose job was to make sure holiness didn't exist in this world if it wasn't earned. We're not going to get into this right now, but you'll see many stories of the Torah are actually backwards hidden stories. You know, for example, Lot, Abraham's nephew, gets seduced by his daughters after they fled from Sodom and Gomorrah. It was destroyed because the generation was evil, and they thought they were the last people alive. They get their father drunk, and they seduce him. And from this comes Ammon and Moab, these two nations, the Moabites. And from the Moabites comes Ruth, who ended up converting later on and married Boaz. And from this comes King David. So you're trying to tell, and King David, you know the line of the Messiah. You're trying to tell me that our Messiah, the Redeemer of the world, his source was in an incestuous relationship? How does that make sense? It's the last place you would think to find such holiness. So it was all hidden. This is the theme of reality, the theme of what we're discussing. Now let's get back to these sparks that went around the whole world, these vibrations. Now you have a problem, sparks around the world, let's create a solution. Form a nation whose sole purpose is to recollect these sparks. That's the mission statement of a nation. And so the creator of the universe started shopping around. Who's going to be this nation? I was taught that Abraham wasn't chosen to be Abraham. It wasn't like he was in heaven and all of a sudden they're like, Abraham, you're up. Let's go. It's your time. They say that the attribute of goodness was lost in the world, and it didn't have a partner on the ground, and then it found Abraham, and it went into Abraham and worked with him. So we believe that Abraham was chosen to play this role, to form the tribe, to form the team who's going to collect these sparks. Abraham had Isaac, Isaac had Jacob. Then we all know Jacob had 12 sons, and this was the formation of the collection team. Now the first story that the Torah teaches us about these 12 tribes teaches us exactly how these sparks get retrieved. Now every location gives off unique energy. For example, if someone's at a beach, where there's people dressed immodestly, so maybe they're going to have thoughts of immodest thoughts, coming to them because of the nature of the place is going to trigger that in their brain. If there's someone in a bank, maybe that's where he's going to have thoughts to maybe steal money because the nature of the place gives off that energy. So every place around the world has its own energy and it gives off those thoughts, and the people living in those locations absorb that. The energy of the location becomes manifest through the people living in that region. So what do you do? How do you deal with this spark recollection? There's sparks in specific locations, and the people who are living there have absorbed them, and they're living proof. They're living, a live specimen of this spark. So the job of the people of Israel is to go get it back. How do we do it? The first story of the Torah about the 12 tribes teaches us they go down to Egypt. Again, in a backwards way. Joseph gets sold into a pit. Thrown into a pit. The whole thing is sold as well. The whole thing's backwards, and all of a sudden he's second in command in Egypt, and the brothers are coming down, and all the tribes of Israel are down in Egypt. And what did we do there? We spent a few hundred years doing what? We were taught we became like the Egyptians. We learned their culture. We spoke their language. We were able to put on the Egyptian outfit and go to the Colosseum and blend right in. There was no difference. Now that, what I say, is creating a cast, a mold around this specimen. So by becoming like the Egyptians, we've actually learned their energy. We've learned their vibrations. We've absorbed it. We've extracted it from them by becoming like them because they were hosts of it. They were living in this region. What happens? We get the energy, we get the vibrations, we recollect something that was lost from Adam, we bring it back into our collective consciousness, boom, and we're out of there. We're gone. We're on to our next stop. So the first story of the Torah is teaching you what's about to happen for the next few thousand years. You're going to go to these places, you're going to become like them, and you're going to leave. And we leave Egypt, we go into the desert, Moses takes us out, and we get the Torah. People of Israel get the Torah. We go, which the Torah was the guidelines, going forward of how to ensure that you could fulfill this job of collecting the sparks of Adam. Because not every generation going forward was as righteous as the 12 sons of Jacob, so we needed this code, we needed this guidance. We go into Israel. There's wars to eradicate people who are offering their kids to gods on mountaintops and worshipping pagan idols. And the story culminates in the building of a temple. King David lays out the master plans. His son, King Solomon, builds the temple and instantaneously becomes known around the world as the wisest man. Kings and queens from all the nations come and give him tributaries, give him gifts, show him honor, respect. And it was complete harmony, a complete paradise. Now, if I was an Israelite in the kingdom of Solomon, I would think to myself, well, this is good, but we know that there's sparks around the world, so how is this going to go down? Are we going to stay here? Are we going to leave? And you do see at that time, King Solomon set up colonies around the world, and there were villages, and there was this operation to try to create a unified global family. But it didn't last long. After King Solomon's passing, the next generations, there was politics, I guess you could say, regarding the temple. The taxes on the temple were high. The temple was in the land of Judah, the land of the Judeans. The land of Israel was broken into 12 different parts for the 12 tribes. One tribe specifically had no land. It was Levi. He lived amongst all the brothers. But the tribe of Joseph inherited 2 different portions. And there was a split. The tribes said, we're not any longer going to pay tributary towards the temple. We're not going to give our taxes over there. It's too much for us. We're making our own temple in the north. And there was a split in the kingdom of Israel. The southern kingdom in Judea had the temple, and the northern kingdom had 10 tribes. If you ever know where the name Jew comes from, it comes from the name Judah, from Judea, from Yehuda. Why? Because those northern 10 tribes disappeared. They went missing. The books teach us that the Assyrian army came in, the Assyrian king came in and exiled these northern 10 tribes into the Far East. Why exile? Why not kill them? Exile was much more cost-effective back then. You didn't have to, wipe out a nation and lose soldiers and feed your soldiers, and there was a whole mess. Simply intimidated them, make them leave. You take their land. The people who left will now act as a natural barrier towards invading Mongols from the Far East, and it was a smooth transaction. The southern kingdom, the kingdom of Judea, that was the last they heard of him. It became a legend, and it became prophecy that one day they'd reunite. During Jewish prayer every day, before we say the Amidah, where we stand and reflect on the greatness and the blessings of the Creator, we speak about the unification of Yehuda and Yisrael. Ufdei kunumecha Yehuda v'Yisrael. These are two separate entities we're discussing. There's an entity of Yehuda and there's an entity of Israel. And all of the literature of the Jewish people speaks about this reunification of the two. And for thousands of years, it was just a legend. It was a hope. It was something people thought about. I would like to now today come here and report a little bit about what ended up happening to these tribes, where they went, who they may be today, the influence they had on the regions around them. I think it's fascinating, and maybe some other people may as well. Now, they were sent into the Far East, these tribes. And if you look at the road from Israel towards the Far East, there's a name for it. It's called the Silk Road. And in a very specific time along the Silk Road, we see things that don't add up. That you don't want to use the word coincidence, but just they aligned very well, you could say. Today, at the start, the main foundation and one of the main trade points of the Silk Road in Afghanistan, there lives a nation. Well, first of all, Afghanistan is called the graveyard of empires. Why? Because the same people have been there for almost 2,600, 2,700 years. I guess about 20 to 50 years after the tribes of Israel went into exile, this nation has been there. And all the great conquerors couldn't defeat them, whether it's Alexander, Napoleon, Genghis Khan. The Soviets tried, United Kingdom tried. America didn't look too good right now for them. The same exact people with the same customs, traditions, and codes. They call themselves Bani Israel, the children of Israel. B-A-N-I, Israel. The name we know them as is Pashtun, or the Pathans. And their legend is that they're from the exiled people of Israel. They have very interesting customs and traditions that you only find amongst Mosaic law. For example, they practice levirate marriage, which if a man passes away and he has a wife and they have no children, she's obligated to marry his brother, but there's a process to free her from that marriage. But that scenario which exists in the Torah and Mosaic law, you find amongst them. They also have cities of refugee, which means if there's an inadvertent killer or someone running for protection, there's cities designated where he could be safe. There's laws to protect those men. The major clan names in Afghanistan are the Rubaini, the Gadi, the Ashuri, amongst many others, which are similar to the tribes of Israel, which are Rubain, Gad, Asher, very paralleled. One of the most, greatest, most prominent, famous clans of these regions are the Yosef Zai. Zai, amongst their language, means children of, son of, children of Yosef. If anyone saw last year's Nobel Peace Prize, it went to a girl named Malala Yousafzai. She was on the front cover of Time magazine. Someone from these 10 tribes of Israel on the front cover of Time magazine, and it's not a national conversation that this is actually happening, that these people are resurfacing. If you ask any of them, personally, I got into this. I read about it in these books that were written in, for the last 50 to 100 years about these clans. There was legends for the last 2,000 years that kingdoms of Israel lived in the Far East. So I read about these books and I read about these names. So first thing I did is I went on Facebook and I started typing these names in. I started finding people, young gentlemen, young ladies, and I was asking them these questions. I said, is it true that you're from the lost tribes of Israel? Can you tell me about this? And you type in Yosef Zion Facebook and only people from Afghanistan come up. And they said, yes, it's true. My grandfather told me we're from the children of Israel. We're Bani Israel. We have a legend that the Judeans, Judah, one day reunites with us and we create a global family. Well, my mind was blown. I was fascinated. This is serious stuff. If you follow the Silk Road, you'll start to see trails that were left by the camps of these people. First of all, if you look in Kyrgyzstan a little bit north, they have the Epic of Manas, this legend of a man named Manasseh who was a hero, and they also identify with this. And if you go into Kashmir, you'll find people, multitudes, not 10 men, not 15, multitudes of humans saying, we come from these nations of the exiled Israelites. At the end of the Silk Road, south of Burma, Mizoram, Manipur, you already found people calling themselves B'nai Menashe, the children of Menashe, who are from the house of Joseph. And now there's a few thousand of them in Israel right now who are flown in and rejoined their brethren. Now we'll address an interesting point. There was a few thousand of these men, Menashe, women and men, who came back. There's hundreds of thousands of them over there who are now kind of Messianic Christians. And millions from that specific clan who identify with being from these, they call them the Kuki Shinlung clans. So I ask a question, how did they become Messianic Christian? If they're the tribes of Israel, they should be the tribes of Israel. I heard an excellent explanation about this. Let's say you're a tribe of Israel in the exile. And there's such a concept called Yeridot Hadorot, where every generation we dwindle, we lose our power. So you're really losing everything you once had, all your glory. What's one legend you're going to hold on to? That you're a chosen nation, and one day there's going to be a redemption. There's going to be a redeemer from the house of David who's going to come bring us back. So if you're a father and you have your kids, you can't really teach them that much, but this one thing you can instill in him. And now all of a sudden you're in the banks of India, south of China, you're on the water there, let's say in the year, 1100, 1200, and you have this memory, this legend. All of a sudden a boat comes to your shores, some men come off with some medicine and some books, and they say, we are here to spread the word of the redemption, the Redeemer that came in Jerusalem from the house of David. It happened, here's the books, now we're creating a global family. This is what they expected to hear. And all of a sudden, hundreds and hundreds of years later, they're hearing something. For them, it was a fulfillment of a prophecy. So they all put their special garments on, they celebrated, they made feasts, the redemption, what we said we would hear, is happening. And Christianity spread like wildfire in these regions. How many billions of people are Christians today? And now with the internet, with the age of information, people are saying, hey, you know what? The redemption didn't happen yet. We learned that there's specific things for the redemption to be called the redemption. For example, there needs to be a temple built in Jerusalem where all humans can come pray. The tribes of Israel need to be united, and there needs to be no more war. So, slowly, it's happening. These people are dropping the pagan concepts within their Christian services, and they're understanding what they're left with is this Israelite identity. And they're coming back onto it, and there's a big wave I see happening in these regions. So we see from Afghanistan towards the end of the Silk Road, have this Israelite identity. The same exact year that the tribes of Israel went into exile, about, within 100 years, Buddhism was founded. The first two students of the Buddha were Pashtun Afghans. We know this for sure. So 1 year, men are offering their kids to their gods to create rain and to appease them. And then the next year, they're talking about nirvana and oneness with their mind and meditation. So who'd they run into? What happened during those, pivotal years that this culture boom happened along the Silk Road? Obviously, before that, there was other religions, Hinduism, right? The Torah teaches us Abraham had lots of other kids, we don't know their names, and sent them off to the Far East with gifts. So we shouldn't be surprised to see lots of wisdom out there into the Far East, but specifically that the year the tribes of Israel went into exile, you see a specific style of thought emerging. It didn't get interesting yet, because it's about to get interesting. Where this whole Silk Road culminates is in Japan. Now, Japan today has an emperor, a king of Japan, a royal emperor, who's actually on the oldest monarchy in the world today. He's a descendant of the first emperor from, let's say, also about 2,600 years ago, within 100 years of the tribes going into exile. And the Japanese have their own culture called Shintoism. And their legend is that they were once a chosen nation, exiled from their homeland, and reestablished their kingdom in Japan. Fascinating. And they flew out a Rabbi, Avichail, within the last 20 years to show him some of their signs, some of their traditions, some of their teachings, to see if there was something there between them and the lost tribes of Israel. So first, they showed him that they have a holy temple, a grand temple. They have shrines all over, but they have a holy temple, and it's located on Mount Moriah in Japan today. And everyone knows that the Temple of Solomon was also located on Mount Moriah, actually right behind me where I'm speaking. And in this temple, they have a chamber, the outer zone, where people come and celebrate and pray and serve. And they have an inner chamber where their priests do animal sacrifices. And they have an inner chamber, a holy of holies, which is seldomly used. This structure mimics the temples of Solomon, which had an outer chamber for people, inner chamber for priests, and then an inner chamber of the Holy of Holies, where they kept the golden ark on 4 poles. Well, today in Japan, they also have a golden ark that they have on 4 poles that they hold and walk around with. This is not 500 years ago, this is today. They have big golden birds on their ark, just like we had on our ark, and they keep 3 things in their ark, just like the people of Israel kept 3 things in their ark. And all the priests in Japan wear these little circular boxes on their forehead today with 4-cornered garments with tassels hanging, and they blow their horn every morning. And you have this whole little King Solomon-style worship going on in the mountains of Japan in the Shinto culture with about, I think, 70 million followers. If you look at the Japanese alphabet, it's nothing like Chinese or Mandarin or their neighbors. Almost all the letters have very specific resemblance to the Hebrew alphabet. And a lot of their words also do. I don't know if this is the best example, but I was taught that they have a word samurai, which the samurais were the island guardians. And we know that the tribes of Joseph, because they were raised in Egypt, they had a specific accent. They didn't say the sh sound from the letter shin. They pronounced that s. So if you look at the word samurai, and if you put the shin in, it would be shomer I, which in Hebrew means the guardians of the island. Shomer is guardians, I is islands, which was the function of the samurai clan. It's heavy stuff. And if you look now on these documentaries being released from Japan, they have TV shows and news channels where they're thinking of all these different ways where they're connected to the tribes of Israel, and they're building this identity around themselves. It's fascinating, really fascinating. I have no words. This is something that was spoken about for thousands of years, and it's happening. Are they really? Are they not really? It's almost irrelevant. The prophecies don't consider that. The prophecies say there's going to be a global nation that's going to form. And we were taught in the Talmud, the ancient legend, that the reason that the tribes of Israel went into exile was to bring back a global family. Right? All it takes is one man to go somewhere and create a paradigm shift. So we don't really know how it happened yet, but we know that a bottle shattered and glass shards flew all around the world. These are the 10 tribes along the Silk Road: Afghanistan, Kashmir, Kyrgyzstan, Mizoram, Manipur, south of India, Japan, all over there. And I'd like to now bring up another interesting place that you're finding descendants of the Israelites, but may not necessarily be from the 10 tribes, but will also play a role. And it shouldn't be overlooked. It's a very serious scenario. Is in Africa. Africa has perhaps hundreds of millions of people with this identity right now of being from the people of Israel. Does that mean they were from the 10 tribes? Likely not. We were taught by the historians and within our own traditions that when the Romans conquered Judea, a few hundred years after that the tribes of Israel went into exile, perhaps millions of Judeans were sold into slavery, into Africa, into Rome, deep into Africa. And if you look now, you're seeing people who are most likely the descendants of those slaves who kept true. I'd like to bring up a few specific examples because they're going to be game changers. One of them wrote letters to Israel when it became a state. And they said, we're Israelites out in Africa. You know, everyone laughed at them and they said, African Israelites, these people are just trying to jump on the first world country bandwagon. They're living in a third world country. They got nothing. We're coming to Israel. We got innovation, technology. So they're trying to get on this train because there's such a thing called the right of return. All descendants of the Jewish people from around the world are able to move to Israel. So they said we are also. And everyone kind of laughed at them, like I said. And a few people took it serious and went out there and started studying them, learned about their culture. And a professor from Duke University went out there and did DNA testing on them. And he showed not only do they share Semitic genes from people who were in Yemen and back to the Middle East, these gentlemen, a large percent of them, have the Y chromosome to be Kohanim, to be priests. Now, if anyone who doesn't know, a priest is a specific family clan of the nation of Israel who come from Aaron, the brother of Moses, who was the first priest. And anyone descended from Aaron has the status title priest. And we found that these men in this village in South Africa called Lemba, L-E-M-B-A, carry this genetic marker to let us know that they share the same as from the Sephardic and the Ashkenaz and the population of the people in Israel today. They share the same exact DNA marker. That's mind-blowing. So everyone kind of got humbled a little bit who laughed at them and said, now what? Now what do we do about this? This could have tremendous implications. Another area in Africa you have something big happening is in Nigeria. You have the Igbo people, or Igbo, pronounced either way. There's 40 million of them, also Christians, like I spoke about before, how that could happen to the children of Israel very easily. But also a lot of them are now coming out and converting back or adopting the rules of the Torah without all the paganism that they've been practicing for hundreds of years. There's been books written about it from scholars in Nigeria, from scholars from the Jewish people. And where it gets interesting is, in America, there was a slave trade. And a lot of the slaves, a very high percentage of them, came from Western Nigerian ports. And in America today, you see a very large movement of African Americans who say that they're the real chosen people, that they're the children of Israel, they're the Judeans. You know, so what are they just trying to create an identity for themselves because they were slaves, or is there really something here? And the answer is most likely there is something there. And most likely maybe that they were the original Israelites, and maybe that the Jewish people today who are white, Caucasian people came in a little bit later on. We know that some of the greatest sages of the transmission of the Torah were converts from Rome. You have a man named Onkelos who wrote a commentary on the Torah, unprecedented, that we still learn today. He was a convert. Some of the largest pillars on the transmission today were Roman converts. So here we are, we're Caucasian Jewish people. And now you have people in Africa saying that they're the real people of Israel. It can't be ruled out at all. We know they were sold into slavery. We know now that they're fulfilling prophecies by saying, we're coming back, we want to rejoin the nation. Now, when you have this many millions of people in America, of these African American descendants who are waking up and saying this could be our identity, whether it is or it isn't, again, is almost irrelevant, because the nature of the people of Israel was designed that other humans could join in on it. I was taught that someone is considered a Jew or considered an Israelite through the 613, via the commandments. If you are one with 613, with the amount of commandments in the Torah, then you become an Israelite, you become a Jew, if done properly. So now you have this catalyst for a global family. When we pray on the high holidays, we say an aguda achad, a world-bound community. So what do we do about this? Israel is right now, around the size of New Jersey. You got hundreds of millions of people in Africa. Like we spoke about in Afghanistan, 25 million people, the Pashtun. In Japan, the Shinto people, 70 million. India, this could reach the billions one day. So what do? Do we bring everyone back to Israel? Or does Israel come to them? So I'm personally involved, and I know a little bit about, I'll share with you, what kind of movements are going on to deal with this. Because there are tribal leaders from these nations discussing things now with Kabbalists of the Jewish people. There was a movement in Israel in the early 1900s called Homa Umigdal, which was Wall and Tower. And it was people who returned to Israel, wanted to redevelop it. And they'd go to these northern cities and try to build it up again. And Arab-speaking peoples would come and burn them down, these villages down that they were trying to build up. So what was the solution? They made these prefabricated walls and a prefabricated tower, and they'll show up to an empty plot of land, and in one day put up a wall and a tower and have their own little fortress, and these young people would sleep in teepees, and they'd make a little village, and from these wall and tower establishments started monster communities in the north of Israel that are very successful and thriving today. The first place that this happened was in the Beit Shan Valley, which, according to the Talmud, was, if the Garden of Eden was located in Israel, it was located in the Beit Shan Valley. When Rome took over Israel, they made Beit Shan the capital of Israel. And for 2,000 years, you couldn't walk through Beit Shan without getting malaria or burning from the sun. There were swamps and mosquitoes, it was uninhabitable. And when the Jewish people came back to Israel, they started irrigating and digging. And now if you go to Beit Shan, it actually is known for some of the most beautiful waters in the whole entire world. It's called Emek HaMayanot, the Valley of Springs, where they have crystal clear blue water. One pool is called the Sachna, which is unparalleled in its beauty. I've been to the Gulf of Mexico, these resorts in the past, and I could say that, I've been to Hawaii. The water there is beautiful. And in this little region of Israel called Beit Shan, the water there is just as beautiful. And these Homa Migdal movements, wall and tower movements, started in that region where the Garden of Eden was. And I know today in that exact region there's something going on which is the Wall and Tower 2.0, which they're working on prefabricated villages that could be scaled and expanded around the world, which means you could have an airplane drive over a region, basically, drop out of it instead of a bomb, it could be a shipping container or whatever it is, that kind of unfolds itself and starts pumping water from the ground, filtering it, producing electricity. A prefabricated village that the technology, coming forth from Israel is going to be brought to the world. So I think that's a fascinating thing also. You have hundreds of millions of people raising their hands saying, I want to identify with this little teeny piece of property the size of New Jersey. And this little teeny piece of property the size of New Jersey is developing technology that could put all these nations on a specific unique grid of sustainability, where there's no war, no commodities of oils that you have to buy and trade. We're harvesting electricity from the earth like we're destined to. And I'd like to go into why I think that this is an appropriate scenario. Right now we're in the sabbatical year, which is the Shemitah year. The Shemitah year is when the land has to lie fallow every 7 years. You can't plant, can't harvest, it just lies. And what can't I be involved in the Shemitah year is the curse of Adam and Eve. What's the curse of Adam? It's to sweat from the brow to bring food from the land. And now I can't be involved in that curse. I'm out of that curse. We compare the Shemitah, the sabbatical year, to Shabbat. where it's a day of rest. We also say in the future, when the Messiah comes, when the redemption happens, when the Mashiach comes, it's going to be a great Shabbat. A great Shabbat descends upon the earth, the great Sabbath. So now we see we're in this unique scenario. I'm in this time period that I'm out of the curse of Adam and Eve. I'm in something called Shabbat, and the future is going to be one great Shabbat. So this is a very auspicious year to find ourselves in. But what can I do during the Shemitah year? Well, now there's Israeli innovation and technology that allows us to bring forth from the land and do all these beautiful things that doesn't violate the laws of Shemitah. I'll give one example of this. There'll be many, which is called aquaponics. It's growing fish, farming fish, and the water from the fish is filled with nutrients from the waste of the fish, nitrogens and all these rich nutrients. Taking that water and pumping it indoors into a greenhouse, which is permissible in the Shemitah year, in the sabbatical year, to grow indoors off the soil. And that water is great food for these plants. And the plants are now growing, 3-4 times the amount they would have off this rich water, filtering that water and sending it back to the fish clean. Besides evaporation, it could be a 99% recycled water loop. On the Shemitah year, on the Great Shabbat. And they're using solar energy, wind energy, bicycle pumping energy, countless ways to produce electricity. So you have these little systems where it's running itself. It's freeing humans from the curse of Adam, which is to plant in the ground and to harvest, etc. Right now, the ground around the world has been poisoned by for-profit companies who've been mining the earth and using pesticides and creating non-natural strains of seeds and getting monopolies on them and killing other strains. The ground has been very, very poisoned. And now all of a sudden, on this auspicious time in the sabbatical year, this new technology is emerging to free us from that problem, to make a scenario where the Shabbat year, the Sabbath year, can stretch into the future. And it's all happening before our eyes. So who goes to sleep and wakes up this morning, and every morning and thinks about this stuff? Whose mind contemplates it? So just like we said about Abraham, Abraham wasn't chosen to be Abraham. This force of goodness was lost in the world, and it found Abraham. He made himself available. So too with us. All this stuff is going down. Some people, they got their TV show they got to watch, or they have a schedule, they don't have time, so they can't be involved in this. They'll just, someone will do it. But people who actually think about this and make themselves available to play a role in it, believe you me, they'll play a role in it. There's a tremendous desire from the universe right now to create a global family, and all the pieces have been set. And all prophecies are lining up one by one. I'm humbled by the whole story. I'd like to see it unfold. We also say with Esther, in the time of Purim when they were in Persia, Mordechai told her, you have to play this role to save the kingdom, but don't worry about it. If you don't want to play this role, it's going to happen anyway with someone else. You and your family are going to be erased from the history, and it will happen. This whole thing is going to happen no matter what. It's like if I plant a seed, right, of a rose bush, and I go over to someone, I'm like, hey, check this out. I just planted the seed. I'm going to draw a picture of what this is going to look like in 4 or 5 months. And I draw it, and 4 or 5 months later comes, he sees the rose. He's going to say to me, wow, well, you must be a prophet. How do you know that's going to be a rose? I'm going to say, this seed I know, it has a trajectory. It turns into a rose. This is nothing crazy. So too, this earth, this creation, it has a trajectory from its inception. It's on a path, and it's going somewhere. That's going to happen no matter what. We see it unfolding before our eyes. The question is, how are we going to get there? And it's on all of us to make ourselves available to play that role.